the start and end of both world wars, the lifting of the Great Depression, the death of 2 U.S. presidents. Edgar Cayce predicted all of these events.
Edgar Cayce made predictions about the world's past, present, and future. He predicted the evolution of the human race, the deaths of 2 American presidents, the rise of China, and the fall of communism in Europe, among other things.
He said that China would become the world economic power, that civilization would move to China. Now, when he said that in the 20s and 30s, no one would have believed it. But now it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen.
However, critics have attacked some of his predictions that have lapsed. For instance, he claimed Jesus would return by the year 2000. This has created a lot of controversy, and many ask, was Edgar Cayce a real prophet? What are his claims for this year? But before we answer these questions, let's start by revealing the man behind the myth. Body Edgar Cayce's early life. Edgar Cayce was born in 1877, but unlike other children who played a lot, young Edgar loved to study the mysteries of the Bible, constantly seeking answers in its ancient texts. At times, he studied outdoors in the Kentucky woods. At a very young age, while studying the Bible, he claimed to have found fairy-like beings, little folk who seemed more spirit than human. At 11, he also claimed that a winged woman appeared before him in a vision, asking what he desired most in life. Edgar's response surprises you. He asked for the ability to help others, particularly sick children. This encounter marked the beginning of his life in prophecies. That wasn't his last encounter with the winged woman. Edgar had struggles in school as a kid. His family were worried, especially his dad. When his father scolded him about his grades, Edgar felt sad. He lay down and somehow heard the voice of the winged woman again. She told him to sleep with his head on his textbooks this time. Strangely, when he did this, he could remember everything he read after waking up. Another time, Edgar got hurt at school, injuring his back so badly he couldn't move. His family was terrified. Then, one night, while half asleep, Edgar spoke out loud about a recipe for medicine made from herbs. His parents, desperate to help him, decided to try it. To everyone's amazement, Edgar was completely healed the next day, as if he'd never been hurt. These experiences hinted at Edgar's unusual abilities that would later unfold dramatically. Motivated by his desire to help others and his newfound confidence in his abilities, Edgar Cayce began to offer psychic readings. But unlike other prophets of his time, Edgar Cayce's predictions were not restricted to a single form of prophecy. He covered a vast range of issues, from health and wellness, spirituality and past lives, ancient civilizations, and future technologies. The exploits of the sleeping prophet knew no bounds. Get ready for the most epic moment of the video. Fulfilled prophecies. In 1902, a young girl with a severe head injury was brought to him. Doctors thought she wouldn't survive, but Cayce said her real problem was with her spine, not her brain. He suggested the doctors adjust her spine.
He would read the body as though he were an X-ray machine. And the terminology that he used was quite medical. It's quite amazing.
Surprisingly, the girl improved within a few months. That's not all. Cayce also used his gifts for the betterment of the economy. 1929, the stock market was about to crash, but Cayce knew it was coming. He told his friends to sell their stocks, and those who listened saved a lot of money.
People would slip in a question about who's going to win a horse race or what's going to happen in the stock market, and he would answer them, much to their profit.
A few years later, he even said the economy would improve by 1933, and guess what? He was right again. In 1934, he said Hitler would become an influential leader in Germany. This happened later that same year. Cayce added that Hitler's rule wouldn't last forever, and a war from outside Germany would end his empire. He also predicted a significant war would erupt at the heart of Europe, and Germany started the Second World War, which eventually led to the end of Hitler's reign. He predicted rightly that Germany, Austria, and Japan would team up.
Cayce predicted
that there would be an alliance between the Austrians, the Germans, and the Japanese. He says in the reading, "And unless there is interference from the divine, the whole world will be set on fire."
He said the war would be big, involving many countries, and the US would join in 1941. Almost all his predictions came to pass with fantastic precision. In 1938, Cayce suggested there might be ruins from an ancient civilization under the ocean near Bimini in the Bahamas. He indicated that the city was Atlantis, a super-advanced city from history.
Edgar Cayce saw Atlantis as a massive continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Interestingly, some underwater stones were found in Bimini in 1968, which some researchers believe may support Cayce's prophecies. Cayce added that Atlantis was a vast civilization with technology more advanced than ours, but it disappeared under the ocean about 10,000 years ago due to a great flood. Was this the flood recorded by the Bible during the days of Noah? Tell us what you think in the comment section. His following predictions are even more surprising. One of Cayce's most famous predictions was about the 44th President of the United States. He said this president would be African American, which came true with Barack Obama's election. Cayce also predicted the deaths of Presidents John F. Kennedy and Franklin D. Roosevelt. He foresaw civil rights and race issues leading to social unrest in the U.S. during the 1960s. Cayce was not blind to the realities of the Cold War. During the peak of the Soviet Union's power, Cayce claimed that, "From Russia comes the hope of the world," not in the context of communism, but of freedom. He said this hope would take time, but Russia would eventually break free. Remarkably, the Soviet Union dissolved and abandoned communism in 1991. Another shocking example is the Jewish sect known as the Essenes. In 1934, when very little was known about them, Cayce provided detailed descriptions of the sect, which were later confirmed to be accurate. He even predicted that their records and documents would be discovered. Just 12 years later, the Dead Sea Scrolls, written by the Essenes, were found, lending credence to Cayce's claims. All these grim predictions of Edgar Cayce came to pass in the 20th century. Fortunately, Edgar also made some gloomy predictions for us today. Are you ready for the biggest shock of your life? Here we go. Future predictions. Edgar Cayce made dramatic predictions about changes to the geography of the Earth. He said continents would shift, and the climate would transform the world in ways we could never imagine. He suggested this shift could occur simultaneously when volcanoes erupt at Mount Etna in Italy and Mount Pelée in Martinique. Both volcanoes are indeed active. Mount Etna is one of the most active volcanoes in the world, and it recently erupted just a few months ago.
A very different kind of light show was on display in Italy. Mount Etna is erupting again, sending hot lava down its snow-covered slopes. It is Europe's most active volcano.
Mount Pelée is also considered an active volcano, though its last major eruption was in 1902. One of the most critical aspects of this shift would occur in Africa. Cayce claims that the continent will split into 3 separate parts. This division, he claimed, would be caused by a massive new waterway forming as the Nile River widened and the Red Sea grew significantly. This dramatic change could even submerge the bustling city of Cairo beneath the sea. According to Cayce, Asia wouldn't escape these upheavals either. Think about changes in the geography of India, China, Japan, Korea, and the Philippines as we know it today. Cayce predicted that the Pacific Ocean would move and swallow large parts of land from the Philippines to Japan. This aqua invasion would submerge most of Japan, with only a handful remaining islands. That's not all. The Korean peninsula and parts of China's coastline would also succumb to the rising seas. For India, Cayce offered a definite warning. He advised against seeking refuge in the country's higher elevations due to potential land buckling. Instead, he believed the Himalayas in Tibet and Nepal would offer a safer haven for the Indians. Cayce also made some not-so-beautiful predictions for Antarctica. Despite its harsh conditions, Antarctica supports a lot of wildlife, including penguins, seals, whales, and seabirds. The Antarctica ice sheet provides essential habitats for many of these species and breeding grounds for their young ones. It also shelters them from predators and provides access to food. But Cayce said Antarctica would shed its icy coat, transforming into a lush, green expanse perfect only for agriculture. However, he said Australia wouldn't be as lucky. He predicted flooding would claim a quarter of its land, turning the Adelaide area into a submerged city and, ironically, changing its arid deserts like Simpson and Gibson into fertile farmland. On the other hand, he predicted that New Zealand would escape unscathed and expand. He said New Zealand will connect with Australia to become a haven for those displaced by the global upheavals. We don't mean to break your heart, but even Europe would have its share of this geographical disruption. What you are about to hear will blow your mind. Cayce foresaw much of Northern Europe, including Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, submerging, leaving behind a fragmented archipelago of islands. The United Kingdom wouldn't fare much better, with vast areas from Scotland down to the English Channel succumbing to the rising seas. However, he said some pockets of high ground, including London and Birmingham, might manage to cling to survival. Finally, he predicted Ireland would be almost entirely swallowed by the ocean, with only the highest peaks remaining above the waterline. This may be good news for lovers of oceans because the Earth's waters are about to get bigger. Cayce predicted a new sea would form by merging the Caspian, Black, and Baltic seas. This will effectively cut Russia from mainland Europe and stretch to Siberia. He said this would position Russia as the food basket of Europe because much of its land would become a fertile agricultural powerhouse. The most shocking part was yet to come. If you are not tired of Edgar Cayce's obsessions with continental drift, here's another one. He predicted a complete change in the geography of North America. He claims Canada would see its coastline expand by a staggering 200 miles, transforming regions like Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and parts of Alberta into safe havens for those displaced from Asia and Europe. According to his forecasts, the North American plate will shift, and this movement will create a chain of nearly 150 new islands off the coast of California. This seismic shift would also see the West Coast migrate eastward towards Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. But what about the lakes? Cayce believed the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River wouldn't be spared either. They would merge into a single body of water flowing from the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. The East Coast wouldn't be so fortunate. Cayce predicted extensive flooding along the entire coastline, from Maine to Florida, submerging much land. The coasts of Mexico would also suffer from this aqua invasion. He said the shores of Mexico will submerge under the rising seas. What we are about to reveal sounds scary. Cayce claims that the Baja California Peninsula would be fractured into a collection of islands. He warned that these dramatic changes would displace and potentially kill billions of people. The surprising fact is that he claims that even the quiet rural lands of Kentucky will not be immune to the coming devastation. Cayce predicted that there would be a dramatic extension of human lifespans, with people living for as long as several centuries. While we live longer than people did in Cayce's time, living for centuries seems far from our current reality. Another prediction is about a major global conflict. Cayce believes that the Persian Gulf will be the flashing point of the conflict. He suggested that countries like Libya, Egypt, Syria, and even the waters near Australia will experience active hostility. Thankfully, such a large-scale war hasn't started yet. Perhaps the most unusual prediction involved China. Cayce sees it rising to a global leadership position, even becoming the cradle of Christianity or a significant center for Christianity. He acknowledged that this transformation would take many generations, but China would ultimately become a dominant force in the Christian world. Cayce also had some controversial beliefs about the past and future of humanity. He He predicted a westward to eastward movement of civilization, with China taking the lead. His most controversial prediction involved human origins. He said 5 distinct human races were created simultaneously at different locations on Earth. According to him, life began at the same time with these races that were white, black, red, brown, and yellow. God placed each strategically across the globe. He claimed that the red people were the Atlanteans who resided on a lost continent called Lemuria. He believed they evolved faster and developed technology faster than any other race. Cayce also claims that Native Americans were directly related to the lost civilization of Atlantis, specifically the Cherokee people. However, the Cherokees have a long history, going back about 12,000 years, which is close to when Atlantis supposedly sank. Cayce claims that the survivors of Atlantis fled to the Americas and became the Cherokee and Inca. But that's not all. He also believed in another lost land called Lemuria, located between Europe and America. According to him, people from Lemuria also fled and ended up in Greece, founding the Mycenaean civilization. He even thought they might have shared their advanced engineering skills with the Egyptians at some point. But his next suggestions will challenge everything you think you know. He said we are still going to evolve from our current form. He said there has been a progressive evolutionary leap that began a staggering 18 million years ago. He believed life itself emerged when the spirit transformed into matter. Further, he claimed that humanity underwent a significant evolutionary jump between 10,000 BC and 3000 BC. Edgar Cayce's ideas about the evolution of humankind did not exist in the past. He spoke of a future where we would boast significant advancements. According to him, a new phase of human progress began in 3000 BC and is expected to continue until our current era or the year 2400 CE. He believed we would achieve significant leaps in our knowledge and understanding during this period. But the next prediction of Cayce is even more unbelievable. He claims there would be a dramatic transformation around the year 8000. By then, humans would have gone past the limitations of our minds, reaching a point where traditional societal structures and even schools would become obsolete. In this future, humanity would evolve into a race of enlightened super beings. However, it is essential to note that Cayce made some very controversial prophecies that never came to pass. Even his biggest fans have denounced some of them. For example, he said that souls came to Earth and mixed with animals to create giant people 12 feet tall. He also thought a giant crystal powered by the sun ran the lost civilization of Atlantis. There is no proof of either event. Another prediction was that the US would find a death ray in 1958, the same kind that supposedly destroyed Atlantis 12,000 years ago. In the 1930s, he said giant earthquakes would ruin Los Angeles and San Francisco, but those cities are still here. Those aren't his only predictions that have failed. For instance, while many religions, like Christianity and Islam, talk about Jesus coming back to Earth someday, none of them provide a definite date. Edgar Cayce also had his guess about when Jesus would return. He said it would happen in the year 2000. Well, it's 2024 now, and Jesus hasn't shown up yet. It turns out that Edgar and other people who had made predictions about this were wrong. Some other folks who guessed wrong include religious leader Frank Cherry, Pastor Ed Dobson, and even Timothy Dwight, the president of Yale University, way back in the 1700s. Cayce's followers haven't explained why these predictions didn't come true. What do you think about these claims? Support and criticism of Edgar Cayce. Even after almost a century, Cayce's predictions continue to spark debate. Some of his believers view them as prophetic insights into the future, brimming with events that will eventually come to pass. Others dismiss them as lucky guesses or mere flights of fancy. His work left an undeniable mark on the history of the world. It inspired countless books and support groups, and I fervently desire to understand his worldview and potential insights into what's to become our world. Today, experts across various fields are investigating Edgar Cayce's work, seeking to understand the mysteries of his motivations. Was he tapping into a universal truth, or simply gifted with an extraordinary mind that reasons too far? Cayce delivered over 14,000 readings, and with such a vast number, there's a statistical chance of some predictions aligning with real-world events. However, critics point out that these hits often receive more attention than the misses. Additionally, Cayce's use of vague language and terms like perhaps and maybe is a tactic sometimes employed by fortune tellers. This approach allows people to interpret general statements as though it applies to any circumstances that may arise. Critics also mentioned that Cayce would often get letters from people who were sick. He would then go into a trance and try to help them by telling them what was wrong. The problem was that Cayce didn't realize that some of these people had already died by the time he did his trance readings. Cayce's supporters say that if these people had followed his advice when they were still alive, they wouldn't have died. That might be true, but there's another issue. Shouldn't they have let him know the person was already dead if Cayce was talking to spirits or the universe? It seems strange that these readings only happened after the person died. Also, whenever Cayce's predictions were wrong, there was always an excuse. For example, he once gave a specific location for buried pirate treasure. People went everywhere looking for it, but there was no treasure. Cayce's supporters said that maybe the ghosts of pirates or Native Americans were trying to trick everyone. It seems a bit convenient to blame unseen spirits whenever things don't go according to plan. Despite the skepticism, Cayce still has his fervent defenders. The key argument of his supporters also includes the accuracy of some of his diagnoses and advice to sick people, even though he lacked formal medical training. Such instances and the general love of psychic phenomena contribute to his enduring legacy. A recent poll showed that nearly half of all Americans surveyed believe in some form of extrasensory perception or psychic ability. The same poll also reveals the diversity in mindsets of his believers and skeptics. Those who don't believe in psychics tend to be more analytical and critical thinkers, while believers often lean towards emotional and creative thinking styles. Interestingly, the poll also found that believers reported experiencing greater happiness and lower stress levels than skeptics. The truth is that psychic abilities and religious miracles cannot be explained by science. There's no denying they can comfort those who grieve, hope for those facing struggles, and even structure a chaotic world. So, does the supernatural exist? That's a question no one can answer for sure. Most psychics probably are phonies, just trying to make money off people in pain. But Edgar Cayce was different. He never charged a penny and genuinely wanted to help others. Whether his powers were natural or just strong imagination, it doesn't matter. What matters is that he dedicated his life to helping others. We need more people like that today. People who see themselves as part of something bigger, not the center of the universe. We need more folks willing to look out for each other. Real or not, the world could use a lot more Edgar Cayce, but ultimately, whether Edgar Cayce was a genuine psychic remains unanswered. There's no right or wrong answer. Some find comfort and meaning in the belief system surrounding psychics, while others align with logic and reason. For those who stayed with us to the end, here's an extra. Do you know why Edgar Cayce was often called the sleeping prophet? This was because he delivered most of his readings in a trance-like state. Imagine the wealth of knowledge we could unlock if we learned to tap into our subconscious minds like Cayce. Ready to watch other captivating stories? If you've loved what you just watched and are eager for more exploration into the mysteries of the past, the wonders of the human mind, and predictions about our future, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for joining us today. Guess what? The next secret we will reveal in our video will shock you. Remember to click on the like button.